I'm not going to lie. I'm really excited about this one. Every interview is a pleasure, and I've had so many big names on this show, guys that I never would have imagined that I would have been able to have spoken with in a million years. But I got to tell you, this one is right at the top of the top for me because the man I'm about to welcome to the program is really a broadcasting icon. I consider him to be the greatest of all time at ESPN. He's the GOAT of Bristol in my book. A finer broadcast journalist you will not find in sports or anywhere else. It is my great pleasure to welcome to the program one of my heroes, Bob Lee. Bob, at last
Ricky,
we're face to face.
we have DM'd through the years. You know what I think about you had the bet until my Twitter feed got corrupted and I ran out and everybody who helped me at Twitter got fired. So I can't, I'm in, I told you were the best feed on Twitter, and you're going to be having a crappy day in the middle of the newsroom, and one of your tweets would come by. That's good. Just a comfortable. You're a comfort food. You sweet bastard.
Well, Bob, thank you. Look, being called a sweet bastard by you, that is, I mean, we can put that on my tombstone. Here
There you
lies
go.
a sweet bastard, and if we can put Bob Lee down in the corner and attribute that to you, what more could I ask for? Bob, I mean, I've been such a fan for so long, going all the way back to the beginning when we got ESPN, when we got cable. And I can't remember if it was 81 or 82 in Horse Cave, Kentucky. ESPN, I was like 11, 12 years old, and sports were everything to me. And I mean, there were days where, I mean, I would just leave the TV. The TV probably stayed on ESPN for 24, 48 hours at a time on many occasions
I
when I
wasn't
was
much older,
growing
by the
up.
way.
You weren't. In fact, do we have the tweet, Tim? Throw me the skee ball tweet if you guys have it here, because I do. Take a look at this. I don't know if you've ever seen this one or not, Bob. This is an old one. I said that Bob Lee celebrated his 12th birthday by
Oh
anchoring
God,
SportsCenter
I
and
never
then
saw
broke a
that.
story about skee ball corruption at Chuck E.
Toothpick.
Cheese. Look at that baby-faced youngster there.
I was hired at 24, but I looked like I was 16. Skee ball, a lot of corruption. But as a kid who met his wife at the Jersey Shore, I grew up in North Jersey, but you go down the shore for your summers. Skee ball, man, that's where it's at. And I got granddaughters who are good at it, rolling that ball up there. So it's you gotta know what you're doing with skee ball.
Yeah, you do. It's a staple of any Chuck E.
Absolutely.
Cheese visit. As a father of five, I have spent more time in Chuck E. Cheese
Yeah,
than I would
imagine.
care to admit. But as a dad, everybody's having fun, and then you get a few tokens for yourself and make your way over there. Bob, let's go back to the early days. You obviously started at ESPN in '79. As you said, you were 24 years old and looked like your parents dropped you off
Yeah, I
before
did have
the
enough for my
Sports
mom to
Center.
anchor, though.
There you go. It's important to have that. Um,
Exactly.
Look, let's go all the way back to the beginning, because every sports obsessed kid that ends up going into broadcasting journalism decides to cover sports as a career. There's a story there. When did you fall in love with sports? What made you fall in love with sports? And when did you know that it was something that you wanted to do as a vocation?
Well, I was asked this question on another podcast earlier this week, and this is the truth. I was 6. My uncle was an assistant director at ABC Sports, and this is 1961. And I have a distinct memory of standing in this rickety, hastily constructed press box at the Langhorne Speedway in Langhorne, Pennsylvania, watching this reporter anchor, it wasn't McKay, but somebody from ABC, calling this event into a mic. And the event was a demolition derby where cars, back up. The
Wow.
last car running wins. And I was 6. And I said, this is like the whole buzz around this. Like it stuck with me. And I would get a chance to see the industry from the inside through my Uncle Steve a number of times growing up. And by the time I got to to high school, I was student newspaper, this and that, working on well, I guess the statute of limitations has run out. It was an illegal pirate radio station broadcasting games and running them back and playing them back. But yeah, and by the time I got to college at Seton Hall University, the only school I had applied to because of the radio station, I kind of knew what I wanted to do.
Who were your heroes in those early days in terms of both athletes that, captured your imagination, but who were the guys that you looked to kind of model yourself after in those early days as a broadcaster?
As a person, the hero would be number one, my dad. But as a broadcaster, but as a fan, I have this distinct recollection in the late '60s. The Yankees were crap. So getting good seats, not a problem. And my dad knew somebody who knew somebody. And there we are, 3 seats behind the Yankee dugout in 1966 or 67. And they were just absolute, as the Brits would say, shite at that point. And he didn't play that day, but he came out to pinch hit in the 8th inning. And I'm sitting 6 feet behind this. To the day I die, I'll remember the pinstripes and the number 7 in front of me, that broad back of Mickey Mantle, so close I could reach out and nearly touch him. Because growing up in North Jersey, before I found, not Jesus, but the equivalent, the New York Mets, I was a Yankee fan by default for a while, and Mantle was it. As a broadcaster, I had a chance to meet and actually take a throw during the 1994 World Cup at ABC, take a throw from Jim McKay. And what a thrill that was. And I had a chance to tell Brent Musburger what I learned watching him host the NFL Today as the conductor, the maestro, the de facto producer, and the man stirring the stew together live on the air, and watching that skill at work. So those are the figures that jump out to me.
What was it like in those early days before ESPN was ESPN, right? We look at it now and we know the whole story and it's become so huge. But in those early days when you guys were kind of figuring out what it was on the fly, how much fun was it? And what was it like going to work in Bristol in the early 1980s, let's say?
Well, you hit it on the head with what you said, figuring it out on the fly. Because if there was a master plan in the first few years, it didn't get down to us. We were the ones going on the air. My first day, which was the 3rd day for the network, actually the 4th, was my first full day of work, Monday, September 10th, 1979, if you're scoring at home. And don't you think you ought to be? Went into work, was told, I came in the day before, I had just driven up with all my crap in my car. And they had me record the sign-off. Because we signed off on weekends for the first year. We weren't 24/7 until a year in. Come on in tomorrow morning at 10. We're going to tape an NCAA highlight show, and you'll work with Cindy Malazek, and we'll get you the scripts. And, okay, so I show up in the newsroom at 10. There's nobody in there. No, this is off to a good start. People wander in. We have to tape the NCAA football highlight show, which involved taking somebody else's script and dealing with that. Then come back, and then we'll do the 6 o'clock show, and then come back and we'll do the 11 o'clock SportsCenter, which of course didn't go on until about 12:30. So I walked in the building, my really first full day of work at ESPN in 1979, at about 10 a.m. and left around 1:30 in the morning. And I remember waking up the next morning at the Holiday Inn in New Britain, Connecticut, where I was stashed for a couple of weeks like a federal witness protection scheme, thinking to myself, if I ask really nice, I might be able to get my old job back in Jersey. Kind of kidding, but that's in a nutshell what it was. We had shows to do. We were meeting people there was no book. There were no rules on how to do this except go on the air, stay on the air, do the highlights, whatever you can pull off the cable box in the way of highlights. We have a teletype. George Grant, hi, I'm Bob Lee, and we're doing a show together. I'm just watching you on TV, doing something with Jim Simpson from NBC, who had been signed early on, a great sign of credibility for the network. Here's a guy who's done Olympics and Super Bowls, and here he is sitting with me on the set. We're doing something together, like, oh my gosh. And I'm 24, and I'm working with these people who you used to watch on your TV, and it could have been overwhelming, except there was so much work to do. We didn't have time to reflect on it, which I think was the the breeding ground for our great success, people say, well, when did you realize it was going to be a cultural hit and a success and your life would inflect a change and whatnot? And I honestly say it was like lava. It happened so gradually. And the key to our success was that we didn't sit around and reflect on our success because we had more work to do. And let's hire some more people. I mean, that picture you put up before the break of myself with Tommy and Chris, I think it was out there a couple of months ago as well on your feed. I mean, that just hits me. Because Boomer and I each turned 70 this year. That's a big number. We lost Tommy back in 1996, but we'll always be linked by that shared experience, along with dozens of people whose faces and names you're not familiar with, but with whom I make a practice of getting together with every year at least. We had a huge reunion in October, not far from the Bristol campus, put together by former employees. Over 400. We had to cap the guest list, and it was an exquisite night. 45-year anniversary of ESPN. And, at this point, you don't know if you're going to see everybody together again. So you treasure those moments.
Well, Bob, I mean, your career has traversed so much history, and we have seen the way that sports broadcasting and journalism is practiced change dramatically over the course of the past several decades. When you look at the sports media landscape in 2025, what is there to like? What about it concerns you? And where do you think, perhaps, if you think this, where do you think that we've lost our way a little bit compared to how you think it should be?
Well, I don't want to sound like Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino. Get off my lawn. Don't want to do that necessarily. And it's real easy to sit here like some now 70-year-old coot saying, back in my day, what we did. Because I've established a Center for Sports Media at Seton Hall University, and I work with a lot of students, and I've spoken to lost track of how many schools I've been privileged to ask to speak with. And the message I try to impart to students today is that, yeah, it's easy to be critical of where we're at and what we're doing. Thank you for putting that up. I appreciate that. That was a great event we had recently. But today's students and today's young professionals and today's aspirants in this field, you hold your career in your own hands. You don't have to be hired by anybody. There are so many platforms. You can create your own platform. If anybody told you 5 years ago that the leaders in the sports television space challenging ESPN would be Netflix and Amazon Prime and Google with YouTube TV, you probably said, what? So anybody who says they know what 5 years hence will be is full of it, because you don't really know. What concerns me, I mean, I'd like for there to be more featuring of the good journalism that I know exists, and it does exist. But it's a race for clicks and views. The marketplace rules. And I often ask this question of students when I speak with them and folks. When I worked at ESPN, why did we turn the lights on in the morning, unlock the doors, turn on the computers, and sit down and start? Why did we do all of this every day? And the answers would come back, well, yeah, to earn a living, yeah. Send your kids through college, yeah. To provide programming for okay, fine. But the real answer, the baseline answer is we do all of this to increase value for the shareholders of the Walt Disney Company. And it's a capitalist society, last I checked, unless Bernie Sanders is running through the streets with the flag at the moment. And so you got to get comfortable with that. And it's real easy, I think, for those of us in the media, especially journalists. We have this sometimes dominant diva gene where we think we're doing the Lord's work and God forbid anyone encroach on our turf. We're doing important work, but you've got to accept, especially now as you come into the field, that you've got to earn your keep. I mean, I remember in the first weeks after the pandemic hit back in March of 2020, I think I was doing Adam Schefter's podcast, and it was late in the month, and the NBA had shut down, and all the adjustments were being made by the networks with the remote broadcasts, people calling games from the studio, from their home, whatever. Before the before the pandemic hit, if I wanted to have a guest on from FaceTime or Zoom, which didn't exist at the time, but with Skype, whatever, the engineering folks rightfully would say the quality's not good enough. We can't. Well, now, of course, whatever. And at the end of March in 2020, I distinctly remember saying, once the accountants figure out how much money they have saved this month, the industry will never go back. And it's true. They really haven't. Now, you probably don't notice it on the prime games because no one's going to skimp on a Knicks Pacer game, as long as we have a camera to put on Pat McAfee. No one's going to skimp on the Super Bowl where you've got 45 cameras or so. But if you're talking volume, I mean, Ed Turner this year was criticized, rightfully or wrongfully, I'm not really sure. I got to all the circumstances. Two of their Stanley Cup games, they called off monitors. They didn't travel to the announcers to the site. That's the marketplace rules. Stock price those are the two most important words right now out there. Stock price. That drives everything else through an organization, whether you can expand, whether your show will stay on the air, whether your newsroom will stay staffed at that current level. I mean, the Washington Post just went through a whole nother offer of job reduction buyouts on the last several days. It's a challenging time, but it's opportunity to grab this and make of it what you will. I mean, with what Clay has done with Outkick, what you have done with your show. Of course, producer Tim is the power behind the throne. We all know this, because I used to work with producer Tim before he had the "Don't Fly" list beard of his. But the opportunities are there. So it's easy to get discouraged. But this economy, this country, this industry wasn't built by people who saw the glasses as half empty. It's half full, and more so if you take advantage of these opportunities. But a lot rests on your shoulders as an individual.
Bob, do you miss Outside the Lines? And as you look at what's going on in sports today, are there ever any moments where you think to yourself, man, I wish that I could tackle this in the way that I used to?
I miss the people desperately, and I make every effort to stay in touch with them. And we have stayed in touch, not only with Outside the Lines, but all the things I worked on. And you might have been eavesdropping on me. You got devices planted in my house because something will come along, a story will come by. I mean, Belichick's whole saga. Oh my God, that's a target-rich environment, as they would say in the military. But serious stories too. And you say, boy, I'd like a piece of that. I got some things I need to say, and I think I could do a better job than what I just saw on whatever network it is, and not necessarily ESPN. But then the next day is Tuesday. And the day after that is Wednesday. And maintaining my own interest. I mean, I want to be challenged every day I go to work, and rehashing something that doesn't have another piece of the avocado to peel away that day can feel very same after a while. So yeah, you do miss it on occasion, but you realize that you can't you can't jump in. I remember Joe Theismann telling me once when he worked with us, the former Super Bowl champion quarterback for what were then the Washington Redskins, saying if quarterbacking was just a matter of throwing the football, he could have played until he was 50. He felt his arm was that good. Of course, we saw if you were old enough to remember what happened back in the 80s when Lawrence Taylor took out his knee on national TV at a Monday Night Football game. It was gruesome. You got to be a full-bodied quarterback. You just can't do that. But that always stuck with me. You don't get to choose your circumstances necessarily. You try and shape them as best you can, but not all the time.
Did it become more difficult in any way to do what you did as time went on? Because as I've tweeted before, and you've probably seen where I've tweeted this at some point, one of the reasons I've always had so much respect for you is I never felt that you bent a knee to the changes in broadcasting around you, that you made a decision of who you were and what you were going to be as a broadcaster. And I always felt that you were steadfast to that I knew what I was getting when I listened to Bob Lee, and that Bob Lee was going to tell it to me straight. He was going to tell me what he really thought, and he was going to cover the matter in a nuanced way that, I might be a little smarter after I watched the segment. Did that get tougher to do as time went on in the industry?
Well, thank you for your generous words. Nuance. I gave a commencement speech again at my alma mater about 6 years ago, and the things that were missing from society, I thought were critical thinking, grace, taking it easy on people because we all need second chances, and more than anything else, nuance. Of course, speaking to people who communicate, all of us in 140 or 280 characters on what was in that Twitter is a tough thing to do. Um, Look, we had there were days on outside the lines when you would probably watch and say, well, is this really an OTL treatment on a topic that's OTL worthy? There would be days we had ratings pressure. It wasn't as extreme or in the moment as other shows, but you have to be able to wrap something in a topic in an approach that's digestible and entertaining. I mean, we have to make with more choices than ever now. And who sits in front of a television and watches things? I'm sure most people watching this are watching it on a laptop at work or watching it on their phone and whatever. No one's sitting in front of a TV set. With more opportunities than ever for people to click away and move on, you have to hold their interest. And it became more of a challenge. And yes, that half hour on ESPN1 was valuable real estate. And then we got moved to ESPN2. These are all business decisions, and the people making them, I have the utmost respect and admiration for, because if I had their jobs, I'd be making decisions based on the same principles and guidelines, because it's my ass on the line. And why do we open the doors in the morning? To increase value for the shareholders of the Walt Disney Company. We are a capitalist endeavor. We're not. It's not a university project. So yeah, it got tougher and tougher. But when I stepped aside, my gosh, I took my sabbatical now 6-7 years ago. Oh my Lord. That was principally for personal reasons. Incredible amount of effort to do what we were doing. And it just got to a point where it was time to turn the page and move to a different phase of my life.
Bob, what do you think of the whole Caitlin Clark era as we're seeing it attempt to take off and flourish in the WNBA? We joke on the show a lot. We talk about the WNBA a lot more than I ever would have imagined before I heard that young lady's name, Caitlin Clark. And so much of what we cover, we're talking about off the court drama, allegations of this or that, or, how does this person feel about that person? Do you think the WNBA is kind of fumbling this opportunity with the Golden Goose to this point? What do you make of it?
I think the more you talk about the WNBA, whatever the issue is, in their heart of hearts, they should be saying, thank you, Ricky Cobb. Because, just look at the value of the broadcast properties, the television ratings. The controversies are great. Just get my name right. That's the first rule of trying to break. What's the greatest challenge in this fire hose of content that's being pushed out digitally to every human on earth? You could sit in front of your laptop all day. I subscribe to so many newsletters and blogs. It pains me to delete some without reading them, but I got to go to sleep eventually. The point is to break through the clutter, to be the content that puts up its hand and says, pay attention to me. That's a tough thing to do. And I'm not saying that the WNBA is doing anything cynically, not at all. But my point is, if there is a bit of controversy, as the Brits would say, and it can be wrapped up with a logical explanation that doesn't get too ugly. And I was listening to what you guys were talking about earlier. That's not a bad thing necessarily. And I don't mean to sound cynical and that there's some plan to that. But we're talking about the WNBA. We're talking about Caitlin Clark. We're talking about Angel Reese and all of this stuff. We talked about Magic and Larry. How about Dr. J in a fist fight in the 80s? Who would have thunk the great gentleman of sports would be in there throwing haymakers? You can go to YouTube. So we'll look back on this in 10 years on YouTube, if YouTube exists in this form, and say, hey, remember those days we were wondering about the WNBA? And at that point, franchise values could be up to $1 billion. Who knows? because
Bob,
that's
what
that's
is
the
that?
ultimate measure. Pardon me, Ricky. That's the ultimate measure of success in sports.
Right.
I was taught that by a former commissioner of the CBA, Jim Drucker. Franchise value, just like when we open the doors in the morning for share value, price per share, and franchise value. That's why find me a human being who has lost money owning a pro sports franchise in the last 20 years. You cannot.
And isn't that a powerful thought when we hear so much about how the sky is falling? You hear so much, NBA,
Where's the sky
Major League
falling?
Baseball.
It's not falling on a pro sports owner, especially the ones who won the sperm lot. Have owned the team for 100 years through the family. They're sitting on pure capital gain. Everyone's all angsting, and the Trump administration has proposed a change in the tax law that would cut in half the write-off they get on their intangible benefits over 15 years. I don't want to go into the weeds on tax policy. It's the last thing I'm sure you want to do. Point is, it's an unfavorable law for pro sports owners, which is interesting since the president is so tight with Jerry Jones and Bob Kraft. Weep not for anyone who owns, especially in the NFL is lava. You cannot stop it. It's the greatest cultural force in this country. Name a bigger one.
No, I can't do it. I can't.
You can't. Not one religion, not one political party or philosophy. No, it's the NFL. And it unites everybody. It's the unifier around the Super Bowl campfire and when we watch the commercials. I mean, how perverse is that? How capitalistically lovable is that we gather by the tens and tens of millions to watch commercials together? Oh, it's a Madison Avenue, dream.
It surely is. I wonder what the Doritos commercial is going to be this year.
Yeah.
A society waits with bated breath, Bob, to get that news.
Brent Musburger once said, "This is for all the Doritos."
So, a couple of things here. Pat McAfee, you mentioned Pat McAfee earlier. What do you make of the Pat McAfee era at ESPN, which is certainly a departure from what we saw for a long time over there?
Listen, I respect the hell out of what Pat's created and how he has taken this moment, this opportunity. This is what we preach to youngsters who have aspirations coming into the field. Created your own platform, your own identity, your own brand, and break through the clutter. And you're the piece of content that screams, "Watch me." And Pat's done that. It's not an ESPN show. Yeah, but it is an ESPN show. No, it's not an ESPN show. It's licensed, but those nuances fall by the wayside. Listen, I respect what he created and how it's been managed to a position of success and how it seems to be working well. It's not the way I would do a show. It's not the way I would report issues, but like Baskin Robbins makes a lot of different flavors. But that cut last night that he showed from the game, I just disappointed. There's a way to creatively taunt Ben Stiller and Spike Lee and whoever else is coming out from New York to the game without having to resort to calling them SOBs. And I wonder if somebody in the league office picks up the phone today and talks to the Pacers and say, let's be careful who we give the mic to, or what words of advice we give to those we give a public address mic to. Is it necessary to go there? Look, I'm going to sound like I'm on my fainting couch in 1890. I get it. The F word has burst through. Politicians use it freely. It's on everywhere except over-the-air television now. I get it. But can we go through a pretense of having some decorum some places? Maybe.
You're no prude, Bob. You've been consuming my tweets for years. And I think what you're saying is, I think what you're saying is, it's true. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you need to just do that thing over and over and over again. It's like lyrics to songs, right? God help me. I'm talking to Bob Lee about WAP. But remember the song WAP that we were all so concerned about for a while there?
My buddy Tom Cotter, the comedian, and you can find this on YouTube, took the lyrics from WAP up against Baby It's Cold Outside, that song from the 40s, which was getting a lot of revisionist and Me Too attention for being very paternalistic and from the patriarchy. And Tom Cotter does this back and forth between the lyrics. These are the lyrics that people were criticizing. These are the lyrics that are being celebrated by this current hit. And it's hilarious and illustrative and enlightening all at the same time. I would encourage you to find it because, yeah, you know, I got
I've
four
seen
young,
it.
I
It's
got four young
brilliant.
granddaughters, and
It's
they're going to
absolutely
develop their
brilliant.
own worldviews. But like, I'm not going to be the one that says, "Hey, listen to that song." You know, somebody they're going to have to encounter it themselves at some point, make their own
Yeah.
decisions. But putting it in people's faces, that's tough.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think that that's a distinction that some of us might be well advised to ponder a little bit more. Um, Bob, when you look at the future of the industry, Tim was talking with me. I read the article that you sent over talking about AI, for instance. That was something that I was dealing with in my old profession as a college professor.
Yeah.
The whole cat and mouse game of it was just starting to happen, really my last year, where AI wasn't really a thing until suddenly it was a thing. And now it's really a thing and it's getting
Mhm.
better, it seems like, by the minute. And then you start considering, well, if this is where we are now with AI, and 3 years ago it wasn't even on my radar, I was aware there was such a thing that existed, but now it's a part of my everyday life. I actually use AI on virtually an everyday basis for something or another. Then I start thinking, well, how good is it going to be 2, 3, 5 years from now? When you look at the industry, and maybe you could speak to AI a little bit in this as well, what concerns you and what do you think is going to be sort of the next level of challenges as we go forward and try to navigate this technological world that we find ourselves in?
Well, I got to tell you, I had this conversation with people. I had lunch last week with two. There's about 150 years of sports journalism experience around the same lunch table at this little place in Connecticut, where, by the way, the night before Joe Biden had just launched, and we had the same server. And we're talking about this, and point I was making to my fellow former colleagues, to be in, you talk about, do you miss working in the newsroom? Do you miss OTL? I mean, I can't imagine the challenge that exists on the very basic level of verifying, is that a real soundbite? Is that tape real? Is that image real? I mean, for example, when Pope Leo was elected, and by the way, Pope Leo, his name is Bob. He was raised a Catholic, born in 1955, with a degree from a big East school. Where did I go wrong? Right? He got the big chair. But I asked ChatGPT before we knew he was a White Sox fan, just for the hell of it, he said, referencing the Pope. ChatGPT, create me an image that shows the just elected Pope Leo throwing out the first pitch at a Cubs game. Took 2 minutes. It's freaking hilarious. Okay, ChatGPT, create an image for me showing Pope Leo in the bleachers at Wrigley sitting next to Ferris Bueller. Took 3 minutes. Beautiful pictures. Every day, every piece of video. I mean, I doom scroll occasionally on Facebook. Stuff comes along. How do you verify this? How do you know the efficacy of every soundbite, of every piece of B-roll? It's tough. Now, and then, all right, the next slice of that story of AI, the impact. And I just saw something on Axios this morning, what some people are saying, what AI is going to do, the white collar industry is going to wipe out entry-level jobs in the next 5 to 10 years and drive the unemployment rate in some industries up to double digits. I mean, logging tapes, cutting highlights, writing rudimentary copy, even some involved copy, all done by humans, all done by a lot of people in their first or second jobs in the industry. We may not need them in 3 years. And if I was running the company, the humane thing would be to do, let's hit the brakes on hiring, because we're not going to hire somebody we're going to have to let go in 18 months because of AI necessarily. It's a challenge all the way around for those entering the industry, for those managing the industry, and for those that are hiding under the sheets, wondering whether it's going to mean the end of humanity if they get a hold of the nuclear codes. Not to go too deep on you, Ricky.
Well, there's a thought. I may need to
Yeah,
get
I
drunk.
know.
After this episode, Bob, we could continue this
Let's
over
say over
cocktails
some PDRs.
later.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and Tim's in my ear. He wants to get your thoughts on Stephen A's flirtations with the White House.
I
What
love
do
it.
you what do you make of it?
I consider Stephen a very good friend. He's done some huge solids for me over the years. I remember the first time I interviewed him back in 2003. Was it? Yeah, it was 2003 when the entire Rush Limbaugh thing blew up at ESPN. And Stephen was still at the Inquirer, and we met that way over the bird, and we became colleagues and friends. And I got to believe, and I said this at another podcast this week, that when Stephen puts his head on his pillow at night and pulls the cover up, that he's kind of chuckling to himself as he goes off to dreamland. And God bless him, he's earned every single penny of that new contract. He's the hardest working person I know. He's got to think to himself, my God, what are they doing thinking I could be president? I mean, there's this long piece in the New York Times within the last 2 weeks. We're going to look back in 2 or 3 years at this period, the boomlet for Stephen A. Smith, and say, what were we smoking? Someone. I think. Listen, anybody can be president. We raise our children with that expectation in a Norman Rockwell America. But it illustrates the extent to which celebrity is an increasing part, almost the dominant part with our current administration of the political pie, famous for being famous. I think it's fascinating. I think it's forced some people, maybe in the political sphere, to actually have some serious thoughts about their own intentions and qualifications and laying the groundwork for their runs at the presidency. But I'm amused by it. When I cease to be amused and become alarmed by it, and Stephen, if you see this clip, it would not alarm me if you were president. You would exercise great judgment, but that the entire infrastructure around the presidential race would allow that to happen would be interesting. Stay tuned.
How about Bob Lee, the fan? What is your relationship like with sports these days? Just purely from the recreational standpoint of what do you consume the most? What do you enjoy following the most these days?
My Mets, which can be a challenge based on baseball's 19th century blackout rules and moving between. We were fortunate to have two different residences in areas of the country, so blackout and getting a hold of it. But the Mets are blessed with the best booth, Gary, Keith, and Ron. It's not even close with everybody else. And I'm sorry for if you work in one of those booths, but it's a joy to watch. It's just similar with your Twitter feed, Ricky. It's comfort food. It just feels good just to sit and immerse yourself in it. Waiting for last night, for example, at the end of the game against the White Sox, they were forming a little victory circle. They had a walk off. I think it was a walk off. No, it wasn't a walk off. They just won in the ninth inning, and they didn't convene their little kick victory dance. They waited for Soto to get there. He was the last to arrive from right field, but they waited for him. When he blossoms, and he will, he's too good a player not to. It's going to be something to watch. So the Mets and English Premiership, my Spurs, who had a wretched regular season, but we're well down on the table. But there's always next year, and that's pretty much it. I don't really. I didn't watch much of the NFL. It's tough to be a fan of the NFL when you know what you know about the politics of the league, the finances of the league, but also just what that game can do to humans. I mean, every play is a car crash, and you can make it safer, but you can't make it safe.
Well said. Well said. There's just an inherent danger there that
Yeah.
you have to live with if you're going to play that game. Bob, look, I'm in danger of taking up your entire morning here, so I'm going to wrap this
Well,
up. But I want to
the
thank
patio.
you.
We can power wash together.
There you go. I really do want to thank you, though. I've had so many people on this show that I admire, that I've been a fan of for years and years and years, but I was telling Tim last night, I was more, starstruck, might not exactly be the right word, but more just amped to talk to you than I was to sit 5 feet away from Lawrence Taylor and interview him from Radio Row back in February. It is truly a pleasure. When you reached out to me, I went back and looked this up. 2019, you sent me a message on Facebook, and we may have had a couple of exchanges on Twitter before that, but you sent me a nice message, and I don't know if you'll remember this or not. It was in reference to a Buzz Aldrin tweet. It was a picture of Buzz Aldrin and his family, and I said every time somebody said, "Are we there yet?" Finally Buzz turned around with a steely gaze and said, "I've been to the moon, motherfucker." And you told me a story of a friend of yours who I guess knew Dick Clark or whatever, and he was privy to a comment that Buzz had made about being on the same program as Muhammad Ali. It's like, are you excited to be here with Muhammad Ali?
And Buzz
was
turned.
maybe not as impressed.
I've been to the effing moon. And by the way, Buzz grew up right in the town right next to ours in New Jersey. He grew up in Montclair. I grew up in Bloomfield. The year he landed on the moon, my dad sang in a barbershop chorus that was based in Montclair. In October of 1969, the moon landing was July 20th, 1969. Remember that, it's my wife's birthday. But they had a special guest at the end of the October show in Montclair come out. Here is Colonel Aldrin. Place went nuts. You have to remember the time and place. We had landed on the moon. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins up in Apollo 11. And they sang God Bless America. And he went through and he shook. My dad got to shake Colonel Aldrin's hand. And Buzz is still with us. He talk about people who chart their own course. Yeah. He does.
He's got a young wife, too. Have you seen his wife's got a he
does, yes.
Younger than he does, yeah. He's got a bigger age difference than Belichick, I think. So Buzz is this guy really is a legend.
How did we do like the better part of like 45 minutes and not spend 5 minutes on Bill, but God bless him. God bless him. I'm in my 70s, so like,
all right, well
I look across my wife, I said, there's a game plan here.
What's going on? Has Bill lost his mind? We've still got 60 seconds for this. Has Bill lost his mind? This does not seem like the Bill Belichick that I have known in public life.
But when you get to your 70s, that won't be the question you ask yourself.
Oh, there you go. All right. Well, look, I will say this, Bob. There have been a lot of popes. Yes, you fellow Big East grad and all of that. There have been a lot of popes, but there's only one Bob Lee. And it truly, truly is an honor, sir, to have you on. Everything that your career has meant to me, and I know that there are others just like me out there who cut their teeth watching you and have so much respect for everything that you've done. I consider you the greatest of all time at ESPN, and that is with full awareness of just how many incredibly talented people have worked there.
I'm humbled by your kind words. Thank you. And thank you for what the fun and joy you have. I hope you understand how many people circulate, tweet, text, exchange, and revel in what your feed has done, because it brings us back to, if not our childhood, to our young adulthood. And like, it's a feel good moment. And there are days you need a bunch of them, and you've provided so many, Ricky.
Well, thank you, Bob. Coming from you, coming from anyone, those are tremendous words. Coming from you, it's everything. I'll leave you with this. I told Tim last night when I found out that you enjoyed the feed, when you told me that you enjoyed it, you told me you thought it was the best account on Twitter. I remember thinking to myself, if Bob Lee likes it, I'm doing something worthwhile. And so that has kind of been a little bit of a North Star, because if Bob gets it and Bob likes it, maybe I'm doing something that's worthwhile. So, Bob, thank you. It's a pleasure. I hope that sometime we'll get a chance to sit down in person over a beverage or two and continue the conversation.
I'd love to try and do it. I'd love to come back any point. So just wake up producer Tim occasionally. Nudge him a little bit there. All right,
All right, yeah, we'll try to keep him in line. Thank you, Bob.